Anyone there? Anyone there? Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar this morning. We're excited to be here. We're going to talk about the latest ways to attract and retain the best talent. My name's Joe Staples. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Motivosity. We're excited to host this webinar today. Grateful for you joining us. Joining me is Austin Miller. Austin is the CEO and founder of IsoTalent. And then as you saw in some emails that we sent out, I guess in the last week, we have added some special guests for our Q&A session. So we're going to have Tessa White, the founder of She Team, and Travis Hansen, the CEO and founder of Eddie HR, join us for the Q&A session. Just a reminder for Q&A, you'll see a tab that says either chat or Q&A, and if you'll type in your questions there, we'll respond to as many as time allows. Last thing is, during that Q&A session, our plan is to give away a $50 gift card to the best question. Very subjective. Judges' rules apply here, but we'll pick the best question and offer that up. So with that, the way Austin and I have divided the presentation is really around the attract and then retain. So on the attract side, I'll turn it over to Austin.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I really am. I'm excited to be here today. Let's see if I can move this slide here. Sorry, 1 second. Either way, though, I'm excited to be here with Joe, along with both Travis and Tessa. They're going to be joining us during the Q&A, as Joe said, and honestly, these are some of the smartest individuals I've ever known in my career, so I'm really grateful for this. As a side note, I appreciate Motivosity for letting me join today. I've been a Motivosity user for almost 6 years now across a couple businesses, and I'm a believer in what they do. So I appreciate that they see us as a group that's trying to challenge the status quo a little as well. One of the reasons that I'm excited to discuss this is because research has shown, actually quite recently, that over the last 50 years, they can see that about every 10 years, the field of talent management actually changes. So everything from the economy to trends in the business to generational aspects of people are the things that often create the majority of these changes. So, a few of the experiences I've had recently with some of our clients, we've learned that with these changes, many companies seem to be missing the mark on a few different items. Given that this impacted us at IsoTalent, it was actually critical that we wanted to dig into it a little bit more. So I know that you've joined us today, hopefully to hear some pragmatic yet profound suggestions of attracting the best talent and keeping them. However, as the legend, we're going to say, the legend Michael Jordan once said, the fundamentals never change. There's a right way and a wrong way to do most things. Now you can practice, this is also quoted from him, he said, you can practice shooting 8 hours a day, but if your technique is wrong, then all you become is very good at shooting the wrong way. So this will make a little bit more sense in just a minute. But I wanted to start by actually talking about a passion of mine in the field of positive psychology. There's a relatively new and somewhat controversial idea called the law of attraction. And this idea actually states that we are capable as human beings of attracting more of what we want in life by changing the way that we see and act in the world around us. A simple way to put this actually comes from Plato in 391 BC when he stated that like tends towards like. Now in modern day, we've actually kind of changed that and simplified it by saying the statement like attracts like. This concept, there's actually quite a bit of scientific and both quasi-scientific claims about the relationship of what we do, how we act, and how we think, and how it can attract like-minded people to us. So since its inception, this theory was presented as mostly a feel-good tactic, with very little evidence that was backing it. This was always a really fun debate in one of my doctorate classes, given the lack of evidence even just a few years ago. But recently, there's been quite a few brain imaging studies that are rapidly showing that the brain does in fact conform to its function as it relates to the law of attraction. So perhaps the most convincing evidence to date has been the theory of mirror neurons. By the way, I promise this is going somewhere. So mirror neurons, right? At first, this was actually seen in monkeys, and scientists have eventually found a set of mirror neurons in humans that we really try to attempt to mirror the behavior of someone who is being observed. Now, I want you to think for just a minute about how great you feel when watching a high-speed car chase at a movie theater or amazing hand-to-hand combat by Jason Bourne, right? Because of this, we actually get a dose of dopamine in our brain, and our brain sets up a simulation as though we're doing these things ourselves. It's a major factor of learning and how human beings tend to learn. You start by feeling as though you're a driver in a car or the international spy, since your brain wants to mirror the actions of those that you're watching, at least when you perceive them as doing something that's awesome. So I think what I'm really trying to state here, and a big part of it, I can't advance my slide there again. So what I'm really trying to say is that behaviors in general are contagious. Sorry, we're working on one slide. There we go. So behaviors in general are contagious. For good or bad, we see larger groups and cultures that can really also take this effect. What better demonstration of a group or a culture than a business, or the business that you're sitting in today, where we see mirroring of behaviors of other businesses that we perceive to be stronger, faster, or better than we are. So this is great when success is created but causes issues when repetitive behaviors are duplicated, assumed to be the accurate way of doing things, and later found to be incorrect. I bet everyone on this webinar can associate with this, but sorry, one slide missing in there, so I'll just kind of go from here. Probably the best example that we have is the idea of open office space. So major tech companies all over the world determine the benefits of collaboration by putting everyone in a wide open space. Now, after years of this trend across the world, data and research started showing that the environment has very minimal benefit and a lot of detractors as it relates to productivity and relationships within your business. However, this trend is still one that is focused on many different businesses, and it would take too much money and effort to change all at once. So we pretty much just keep up this trend. We can actually see that there's a few different trends. There we go. They were just out of order. That's my open office space slide. I want to talk a little bit more about a few other trends that are contagious. So from 2010 to 2020, the unemployment rate has actually dropped from 9.6 to a 3.6. Now, this is actually amazing for the economy as a whole, but creates an issue for finding top talent in your business, especially if you dig into the data behind knowledge workers. Now, with knowledge workers, I'm referring to actually removing the trades from that data. We can actually see that the rate goes from a 3.6 to a 1.7. So the reality is that in order to find top talent nowadays, you're typically reaching out to individuals that are gainfully employed, and your ability to really attract them is based upon you being able to convince them that they're unhappy, stagnant, or showing them that your opportunity is somehow better than their current opportunity. So this is where a negative behavior tends to set in. It seems like every behavior jumps on board, every business jumps on board with different trends that attract talent. More food, more ping pong, even stronger benefits, rising comp, flexibility, and eloquently designed office space are all these trends that any business feel they need to have in order to attract the best of the best away from other companies, and that maybe have far less cool indoor sporting opportunities and soda machines. So given these behaviors existed within a lot of our current clients, which, by the way, this is primarily in technology, consumer goods, and services across the US, we decided to actually do a little bit of research on our own. So we did this actually by sending off a couple different surveys. The first survey that we sent out was to over 250 employers to get a better understanding of what they currently believe they are doing to attract the best talent in the market. The second survey we sent out was over LinkedIn and Facebook to get a wide variety of demographics. And the goal is to get an understanding of what items drove people to make a change from one business to the next. With over 150,000 first-degree connections in our firm's LinkedIn, we hope to get a pretty good variety of individuals to give their perspective. We're talking a little bit about the employer data first. On the survey of over 250 employers, we actually had 158 companies respond to it. We felt this was a pretty good sample size, and it was pretty clear that a lot of these businesses had at least a perception that they had good strategies around their talent attraction and what they do to attract the best talent. To cut to the chase a little bit, we had them give their top 3 strategies around what they're proactively doing to attract this talent. We also had them rate how well they think that they were in alignment with what people were actually looking for. So with quite a bit of information, we got quite a bit of information from this data, but what we learned is that it was definitely pretty clear that there was a top 3, with the number 1 being obviously strong comp and benefits. Right? There's been a little bit of a game changer recently as comp continues to rise pretty frequently. Their number 2 was to provide strong career paths for career advancement. And the third one was to have a fun and flexible environment. A lot of words like collaboration and different things like that were used. They also, these businesses, they rated themselves at a 7.2 out of 10 for how they felt their efforts were in relation to what people actually looked for in their next company. So all of this sounded quite positive to me from a recruiting standpoint. I appreciated the company's confidence. I could see the benefit of the things that they were focusing on. And I know that being a recruiter and more formally in corporate HR, we get asked these questions all the time. So I knew that they were real. I knew that they were a critical and important part of getting the right people on the bus, for sure. Now, the real issue for me arose when we received over 350 responses from our second survey that we posted on LinkedIn and Facebook. With this survey, just to give a little understanding of kind of what the demographic was, but we had over 50% of our respondents had bachelor's degrees. Another 32% had master's or doctorate degrees. The age of our respondents ranged between 22 and 61, and we did have a pretty strong mix of male and female participants. So in this survey, we asked an open-ended question about what items drew them to companies that they've chosen to work with, and what items were most attractive to them as they look for their next opportunity. Now, in a majority of the participants, we also asked them to rate their companies, similar to what we did with the businesses, but we asked them to rate their companies at how well they think they advertise or perform these items that they'd mentioned. So again, given that there was such a big sample size on this one, and there were a few that were kind of ranking pretty high, we actually determined a top 4 on this one. But in order of the things that were most important was number 1, a friendly environment with the people that they work with. Number 2 was strong mid and senior level leadership. Number 3 was the impact that they're capable of really making on the company. And number 4 was actually a solid product that was winning and a product that they believed in. So we actually, in our firm, we actually used kind of an acronym. So we're based in Utah, and so we use the acronym of FLIP. Right? So friendly, leadership, impact, and product are these items that we actually felt were definitely the top ranked and the most mentioned as it came to the participants. Now, interestingly, again, we asked them to rank their business on how they felt that they did in relation to these items, and they actually scored them at a 4.4. So a 4.4 compared to a 7.2, which was the company's perspective, is definitely a little bit different. So I was a little floored by these responses, given that each of the items, both on the company list and the participants list, were good. All of them I've worried about myself in my own personal career. All of them we get asked as we're talking with candidates. However, the issue is that none of them really aligned in terms of drawing talent in. So it made me really think, is it true that we are doing everything we can to attract the best talent? Or are we really not focused on what the market cares about right now in terms of that talent? So there was one critical factor that I actually think kind of brought the entire thing home for me. And I wanted to dig into it a little bit. It was something that was extremely interesting and almost trumped everything else, and maybe the baseline of attracting the best talent you can get within your business. Now, to set this up a little bit, I want to refer to a theory by our good friend Steve Jobs. who had a theory himself that he stated in a few different ways. But one of the ways that he stated it was he said that the A players attract A players, and the fastest way to get rid of an A player was to surround them with B players. So I want you to think about that for a minute, right? You push out your A players in your business by surrounding them with B players. Now, I know the concept of A player and B player is subjective and honestly may change from business to business. But within your business, I want you to just kind of step back and think for a minute. How many A players do I have? How many B players do I have? And there's probably a pretty strong correlation to your ability to attract talent. So the highest level of our responses, kind of going back to the data from the participants here for just a minute, the highest level of responses from participants by a pretty significant margin was that idea of a friendly environment with those that I work with. However, in additional comments, participants did not just refer to a friendly environment, but actually spoke to the caliber of people within the business and who they personally got to work with and who they got to learn from. It was funny because as I looked at the kind of subjective data on the side of our data, it was repeated over and over again in a different form of words of, the mentors that they have, the people that they got to work with and how smart they were, even choosing their businesses based upon who was already sitting in the business. And given it was actually the number one reason of the four, it would be pretty easy to correlate that the most critical factor that attracted top talent within any business was the current caliber of talent that the business already had. So in our group, we actually came up with a little bit of a theory, or a theorem, you can call it. It's pretty simplistic, but really your talent attraction in your current business is greater than or equal to your current quality of talent, the talent that already exists in your business. Now, again, the data before was actually really helpful, right? I mean, all the things that it takes to draw that initial talent in were critical and important, but this really hit it home for me because you need to understand all those to get the right, get the right individual in the door. But it's so important that we have the right people on the bus, and they're naturally going to draw other individuals into the business. So each of us have watched companies around us be successful, right? Here in the Salt Lake City market, there's quite a bit of success, quite a bit of private equity funding pouring into the state. And I think we kind of jump on board with quickly mimicking the behaviors of other companies that are a little bit ahead of us. And many of the things that we're doing are actually noble gestures, but others maybe seem to be just a waste of our time and money. And to go back and repeat Michael Jordan again, the fundamentals will never change. Like attracts like. A good friend once told me that people create all value. And your talent attraction model should be focused on bettering the lives of your people, and more importantly, to attract the best talent in your business, start focusing today on getting just a few top performers with a great reputation, and they will naturally draw in people around them that change the game for your business. Once you have this talent on board, you have to figure out how to keep them there. So that's where Joe and I decided to team up on this, and where I'm going to look to my friends at Motivosity who eat, sleep, and breathe this idea every day.
Thanks, Austin.
Yep.
The thing that I loved about what you shared was best, at least, it was around the primary research that you did. So often in these kinds of webinars, everybody just reiterates the same statistics that have been published over and over again. So I thought it was great that you went out and actually looked at it. It was also fascinating to see the difference or the distinction between what CEOs and business owners think and what everyday workers think. So thanks for that. Okay, so I'm going to give you a 20-second infomercial on Motivosity. We are an employee engagement software platform. The core to what we do is around employee recognition, where employees are able to, in a peer-to-peer way, recognize one another for the great work that they're doing. And ultimately, our mission is to help people be happier about going to work and being at work. So if Austin was the attract 'em presenters, that makes me the retain 'em presenters, because clearly if you're doing a good job attracting the right talent, but then you're seeing that talent go out the door with way too short a tenure, then that's an expensive way of doing business. First thing I want to talk about is really this counterfeit culture. And I think this is interesting, and certainly in my career, I'm seeing more of this now than I did 10 years ago. And so here's a good quote from Dino Roberts, who's the global director at Slack. He said, if the reason, and I'll actually add to it, if the reason you're attracted to your employer is that they have free cupcakes or foosball tables or parking spots or nap rooms or free snacks, then there's a bunch more cultural issues that you have to unpack. So a lot of businesses that we interact with and that we see have tried not only to attract, but also to retain talent based on kind of the cool vibe of the office and perks. And in reality, those are good for marketing purposes. I mean, they make a nice walk around when a candidate is getting a tour of the building, but does it really cause them to stay and to be motivated and to perform well in the job that they do? Our view on this is they absolutely don't. And the fear or the downside is it actually creates this counterfeit culture. Everybody thinks, yeah, we're doing great in building a wonderful culture because they look around at all these fun perks that they offer, when in reality, those are way down on the list for what matters to employees. So before launching, everybody wants to dive right in. What can we do? What activities or programs can we launch? Before you do that, you really need to understand what motivates your employees. And I think this is a perfect filter as you look at launching activities or programs to say, does this match or align with what actually motivates employees? So some really smart people at Boston Consulting Group did an extensive study. They looked at motivators for employees, and these are the top 5. And as you glance at those, they are not in the correct order. So I'll give you just a couple of seconds to think about what do you think would bubble to the top? What would be the top motivator or the top couple of motivators for employees? And clearly, when an employee is motivated, they're going to stick around. They're excited about coming to work every day. Well, the answer is, it looks like this. Top motivator is that they feel appreciated for the work that they do. Next is they have a solid relationship with their boss or manager. Number 3 is they have a sense of belonging in the organization. They feel a sense of community. Number 4 is that they feel that they have the ability or the opportunity to do meaningful work. And then 5th is pay. And oftentimes we, can confuse pay with the single and lone motivator for keeping people excited and engaged at work, when in reality it's pretty far down on the list. We could do an entire webinar on pay structure and pay strategies. So I'm really going to focus on these top 4. And the way I'd like to present it is, as we look at those top 4 motivators, again, keeping in mind that we are looking at how do we retain the talent that we want to retain. There are some do's and don'ts. And so we'll look at them in that format. So this first one, recognition and appreciated, where people want to feel appreciated for the job that they're doing. The first don't is don't make it top-down only. There's an issue around trust in the workplace that really can kind of permeate everything that goes on inside your organization. And if you really want to get people to trust you, you need to turn over some of these things to the population inside the business. If they feel that everything's being scrutinized or vetted from the top, that the top is decided, the C-suite is deciding how that recognition is delivered, it really tends to fizzle out and fade and not work. Second don't is to limit it to top performers. I think we've probably all been there where we had a great quarter. We produced some great work. We come to an all hands meeting and they recognize 2 or 3 people who also did great work, not taking anything away from them. But then we sit there and we're pretty demotivated. And when you think about these MVP or Employee of the Month type of awards, you're really sending almost an equally strong message to everybody else who thinks that they're contributing well and doing a good job, but not being recognized. And then the last one on the don't side is don't start something now that will fizzle out over time. So you really need to look at anything you do around recognition and say, does this have legs and longevity? Or am I going to launch it? Yes, it's going to work for 6 months, and now it's kind of blended into white noise and nobody's paying any attention to it. And you need to look at that from the beginning to make sure that you don't put something in place that will fall into that category. Okay, so on the do side around appreciation, do let peers find the good being done. There's no way that managers can ever see everything that happens inside the organization and then express appreciation around it. So as you turn the opportunity or the ability to give recognition and share appreciation to every employee at the business, that's when the magic really happens. That's when people will be able to see all the good things that are happening throughout the organization, and everybody will feel appreciated for the work that they're doing. Next do is recognize that public praise works. And we always hear of certain employees that say, I don't want to be in the spotlight. And there's certainly truth to that, but there's a difference between bringing somebody up on stage and shining a spotlight on them and all eyes are upon them. Difference between that and just using social feeds to let peers recognize each other in a way that everybody else sees. That's the thing that will create some collaboration and really change the DNA of the business, where people are looking for ways to help each other. And then the last one on the do side is to let rewards be things that people really want. And this is one of the things that we see fairly frequently in poorly designed recognition programs. Is there's a small set of gifts that somebody can have, or we decide, this is something that people can put on their desk, but we, being the executives, are going to decide. And so next thing you know, somebody's looking through a catalog and going, okay, I could get a putter, I don't golf, I could get a cooking set, I don't cook. So look at ways to make the rewards that go along with that appreciation something that people want, that they get to pick and select. Next is around building a solid relationship with your boss or manager. So the first don't leave it to chance. Oftentimes, we have good workers inside the organization, and
I don't really want to go in the city again. I'd rather just eat here. But maybe I'll change once we get.
Hey, Travis, I think you're on, and if you could mute, that would be great. So this relationship between boss and manager, don't leave it to chance. We oftentimes promote great workers into management positions. Many of them, the majority of them, statistics would show, are unprepared to be able to be a manager. So you can't just say, yeah, go develop relationships with your employees. You need some things that are formal around that. Next is don't rely on 30-year-old performance review processes. Just about everybody we talk to around this topic, employees hate them, managers hate them, and they feel that they're inaccurate, they have recency bias. There's just some real difficulties around that annual performance review and thinking that that's the thing that's going to establish the relationship between the employee and their manager. And then don't make it optional for managers. This is important enough that relationship has to be part of what a manager works at. And so holding them accountable for what they're doing to build on that relationship, to develop their employees is really essential. A couple of the do's. Do create continuous communication and feedback. So this is the one that really flies in the face of the 30-year-old annual performance review. And it's really built around putting together a structure that allows managers and employees to have ongoing communication and conversations where feedback is given to those employees on a regular basis. Next is make the value worth the effort. So clearly, the employee has to look at this and feel that I'm getting value from these conversations that I'm having with my manager. And the manager needs to approach those conversations recognizing that they have to deliver value or they're wasting the employee's time. They're going to do the opposite of motivating them. And then third is to provide managers with context for the conversations. And this can be done through a variety of different tools, but allow managers to gather easily 360 reviews on people, allow them to see the other recognitions and appreciations that an employee is receiving so that the manager isn't confined to the context of only what he or she sees. Okay, our third one, which is this motivator of feeling a sense of belonging in the organization. So the first don't is don't mistake tenure for a sense of belonging. Oftentimes people stay for a variety of reasons, but that doesn't mean that they feel a sense of community or they feel like they belong in the organization. It could be, it's close to their house, they don't know how to apply for another job, a whole host of different things. But don't fall into the trap of looking and saying, oh, well, that person's been here for 7 years. They must feel like they belong here. Don't think that team activities will solve the problems. We did some surveys, it's been a couple of years ago, but we looked at what people thought of team activities. And it was really split kind of down the middle. There's a portion of the employees that love them, and there are a portion of the employees that really dislike them because they know that when they come back, they'll still have their work to do. Oftentimes the activities that are selected just don't align with things that they like to do. So not saying don't do them, but don't think that that solves your problem, that everybody's going to feel a sense of belonging because you go out and kart race once a month. Don't forget that millennials identify less with their work as defining who they are. So you rewind 20 years and there was a greater sense for a person, for an individual that was a full-time worker. They identified that they worked for, fill in the name of the blank of the organization. Millennials are much less around it. They're much more focused on the relationships that they have outside of work. So what that means is you have to work a little bit harder for that generation to help them feel that they belong and have that sense of community inside the organization. And there are some things that clearly stand out. They love serving. They love kind of the do-good portion that work can provide them as an opportunity. A couple of the do's. Do provide opt-in opportunities for people to connect. So mandatory team activities would be something we'd preach against, but providing things where you're giving them opportunities to connect with their coworkers, doing things that they select or that they want to do. That's really the employer's responsibility, is to create those opportunities. Next is to create a sense of tribe. And there's some companies that are masters at this, and it can be done fairly inexpensively, but helping people feel that there are values that go along with our company or our tribe. And this can be done also at a departmental level. So it's interesting to see that happen as well. And then number 3, help team members connect with the emotional side of your brand. And easier for some companies than others based on the product that you deliver or the service that you deliver. But as your brand has an emotional side to it, oftentimes that brand is established to attract customers or potential customers to the uh, to the to the emotional side of the brand, but there's still the same opportunity to have that emotional connection for your employees. And then the last of the four that we'll talk about is the ability to do meaningful work. So the first don't think that an entry-level job can't be meaningful. Oftentimes we think, it needs to be big and bold and you need to be accomplishing something. But you think of people in very entry-level jobs, just out of college, or maybe they don't even have an education completed yet, but they have a task to do. And if you can help them see what their contribution is to the greater good of the business, and that the business really wouldn't happen without them, that can be meaningful to them. Don't think that your business has to be curing cancer to be meaningful. And that goes along with number one a little bit. Oftentimes you may be in the packaging business or something that seems pretty much like a commodity, but you can still connect the good that your business does in employing people, in delivering a certain product or a certain service, and helping your employees to feel that that's meaningful and that they're an important part of that contribution. A couple of do's. Do give team members things they can own. And, I've found this one to be easily solved, but not oftentimes solved. Oftentimes, especially as we look at more entry-level jobs, we just want to give them tasks. We want to say, okay, today go do this, tomorrow go do that. Compared to, we give them ownership over something. They feel like this process is something that I own, even though it may be entry level or it could be very sophisticated, but they feel a sense of ownership. So instead of thinking that they own tasks, they feel like they own an entire project. And then do help team members feel a connection to the greater good. And there's a couple of ways to accomplish this. One is through the mission of the company and making sure that that gets communicated really, really well to all of your employees so that they can feel a connection there. And then to the good that you provide your customers. And sometimes that even has to be a couple of steps removed. For a number of years, I worked for a software company that provided call center software. Pretty commodity based industry. And one of the ways that we helped our employees feel this connection to meaningful work is we highlighted the good that our customers did. So American Red Cross was a big customer of ours. We talked about what they did and that they couldn't do that without the software that we provided. So even if it's one step removed, you can still help them feel that sense of meaningful work. So hopefully that provides you with some good information. We're now going to shift over to our Q&A session. And again, Tessa White joins us. She is the founder of She Team, which is a career navigation coaching company. She's also, for those of you in Utah, she's a TV personality, talks on a weekly basis about career coaching. And then joining us, and we're going to give him a hard time because he's in Cabo, and we saw video of the ocean behind him. But Travis Hansen also joins us. Travis is the founder and CEO of Eddy HR. Eddy HR is a HRIS system that is primarily designed for SMB organizations. So we think between the four of us, we're going to be able to tackle your questions. A reminder that if you go to the Q&A tab, you may have to mouse hover to have it pop up for you. But then if you will just type in your questions, we will get to as many as we can. So with that, let's go to our first question. Austin, we'll throw this one to you. When is the right time to use an outside recruiter? We know they're overpriced, right?
Totally. They totally are. No, spending the majority of my career actually in-house, and working myself to do as much as I could to not use an outside recruiter. It's actually ironic that we're in the role that we're in now. So, I believe that there is a time and place. I think that honestly, if you've hit a brick wall, if you need a bigger network, if you need to move faster, if you need someone to help push you through a process, those are the times, and it's probably honestly the 5%. Those are the times that you should go to an outside recruiter. I think a lot of your efforts between your employer referral base, between your own efforts in recruiting, between the tools and technology that exists now, I think that, most of the time you shouldn't have to use us. We're for those special 5% circumstances where, again, you hit a brick wall, or you just need to move, or you have a specific targeted position that you just don't have the network for. That's where I think we come in handy.
Cool. Good. Thanks. Tessa, this next one's actually, they directed to you. It says, Tessa, diversity is always an issue here in Utah. I appreciate the efforts to help women thrive in the workplace, but what ways can we best motivate our hiring managers to be intentional about diversity?
Well, I think, I think everybody wants diversity. I don't think anybody goes around thinking that they don't want it, but it requires a little bit of push and pull. I think that you have to have supportive policies, first of all, that would, for instance, we have to look at 2 diverse candidates before we get to a hiring spot. That would be a way that you push somebody into it, but the far more effective way to get diversity is not through policy. It's actually by getting people working together and connecting together. Because connection, I think, is the root cause of why we have a hard time with diversity. So I'm not a big believer in separate groups that create silos, like a women's group and an LGBT group. But if you're connecting and working side by side, even serving side by side, and you mentioned that companies want to have those experiences for people, then you begin to appreciate and want diversity more. And there comes a point where you hit this flywheel, you get enough diversity in, and it starts to perpetuate itself. So I think it's a combination of both policy, push, and pull.
Awesome, thank you. Travis, let's see if we can get you to respond to this one. So the question is, once you have this culture, which I'm assuming they're talking about, you've got a strong, solid culture. How do you build local brand to become more visible to the community and to future candidates?
Well, thanks for having me on. Sorry I'm at the beach. I wish all you guys were here with us, and ladies. Culture is an interesting word. It's I think when you walk into an office, the way you feel, the way people treat you, their looks on their faces, I think it's a leading brand. It's a leading indicator for brand strength. When you hire people, when you're first starting a company, the first 5 hires are probably the most important. They are DNA strands that will replicate, and they will in turn hire people like them. We call that PLUs, people like us. So once you establish a great culture and you do hire your first 5 people, you can start to be much more involved in your community. We have Sunshine Heroes, which is our nonprofit, allows us to go out and sponsor athletic teams, be part of the Women Tech Council, and depending on your industry, what business you're in, you could do a little bit of research and find a way to get more involved in the community, and thus enable your company to hire better candidates. But the best way, I think 80% of high performing teams, they never go out and hire people off job boards. They, based on referrals, sorry about that. Based on referrals and using their own network, they bring in people that are in their network, and low performing teams don't do that. They rely on much more outside sources.
Cool. Anything to add, guys? All right, next question. Once you, When your organization loses a key employee, what have you found to be the best way to find the right replacement quickly? So I think people are looking at, the speed side.
I have some thoughts on that for
Go
sure.
for
No, it's hard, right? I mean, the identification of a key player within a business is hard in and of itself. And when you lose that key player, as I kind of talked about in my session, it brings a challenge, because a lot of people will look at that, because a lot of times key players, high performers, have kind of a following. We tend to call them cultural leaders quite a bit, or change agents. And so because of that, it always is a little bit nerve-wracking for the business. In a lot of the markets that we play in, there is a lot of really good talent out there. And one thing I've learned throughout my career is that someone who may not be the best fit or may not be an A player in one business definitely can still be an A player in a different business. To get to the question directly, I think that, one of the fastest ways to move on it is to rally the team around it. We would always do that. It's funny because some of our best hires came from when we would go to the team, we'd pull them into an office. We'd announce that an individual or a key player, usually someone on their team, was leaving. And we'd say, guys, like, we need to be successful. And most of the time, if we rallied them up, if we motivated them, they knew it was their team. They knew their skin was in the game. The referrals that we got from all of their long career histories and stuff tend to be dramatically higher than those that we could have gone out from a recruiting team effort or a job board or anything. So I think rallying around the team, around the A player, and getting their skin in the game is the fastest way you can get someone on board of those referrals as quickly as possible.
Austin makes a super good point. In all my years, 20 plus years of working in companies, I've only had somebody ask me who I would refer for a position internally, maybe 2 or 3 times. And your best people come from people that you already have working for you. You've got to mine those resources when you lose somebody key. And you're right, you're going to find your best people if you mine those first.
And I think, Tessa, this is a great follow-on. Somebody else asked another question. Do companies rely too heavily on employee referrals? Are we being lazy? Is there a risk of nepotism?
This is a loaded question because while I do believe we can find some of our best people through employee referrals, if structured incorrectly, can also get us lazy, right? It's like throwing spaghetti against a wall. So we have to be careful, back to the diversity question, how diverse is the population to begin with? Because we hire like people. So if I'm working in a company where there's just a whole bunch of, say, white males, they're going to know and associate with white males, and you may not be able to move the diversity needle under those circumstances. Ask a woman where other women are, we'll tell you where they are. So you do have to be careful.
And I know 2 quick comments to that as well too. I think it's interesting because I think, going back just a few comments ago, I think that we're good from an employee referral basis at reaching out to the company and putting, a small spiff in place or something when it comes to getting employee referrals. The problem is we never get small groups of individuals, again, whose skin is in the game, together and say, everybody, we need this. What do you think, right? So that's one comment. To kind of add on to what Tessa just said, I think another critical factor of not having that nepotism as you're bringing in referrals and kind of getting lazy with it is that I think you always have to have a repeatable process and even put internal referral candidates through an apples to apples process with some of your outside candidates or with other referrals or with other individuals. And we see it actually quite a bit in recruiting where all of a sudden they'll, have a friend refer somebody and they'll just like speed them through the process. And they almost get to kind of avoid the apples to apples comparison with everybody else that is very qualified going through the process. And by the way, we see it a lot.
Yes.
So I think it's just important to have that process that's very consistent across both realms.
Awesome.
Can I talk on that real quick?
Go for it, Travis.
That's a great question. Is that from Drew Brady? Good question.
Yeah.
I like it a lot because I do think companies can rely heavily on employee referrals, and we try to look outside for the talent, or we need someone else that's been in another company with that certain amount of experience to come in and save us or help us or this new position. We have a call center. We have a personal chef that cooks for everybody every single day. Her name's Mindy. She's everyone's mom. in that call center, we don't necessarily pay people a ton more. It's usually a $10 to $15 an hour base, but they stay because they get fed. They stay because of relationships. They stay because of Mindy. She knows them. She knows if they're gluten intolerant. She knows, if they're going to be late today, that she'll save them a little extra meal and put it in the fridge. And so those customer service reps that we've hired, a lot of them have grown with inside our company. And so I think typically some of these higher positions will typically look outside. We'll use outside recruiters. We'll try to use our employee referrals, but sometimes, based on the position, we can look right from within our company and promote people. Two of my favorite stories is Selene and Jason. They were both at Harmon's grocery store. My wife was pregnant, gave birth to our number 4. She went on a banana egg waffle diet, and so I was buying bananas and eggs like crazy. Went through Harmon's, and I just found Selene, who just worked so hard. She had a microphone. It looked like she was running the business center along with the whole grocery store. I asked someone, "Who's that?" I said, "Oh, that's Selene. She's been here 5 years. She's a beast." Called her, convinced her to come work for us. She convinced Jason, who was the other manager. They were both about $15, $35 an hour. And they are both turned into our executives. Selene now runs our whole legal department, and Jason's a COO. And Jason, I had hired 2 other guys, CPA MBAs from University of Texas, and he outperformed, outworked, and we just gave him the opportunity to grow from within, and he's been phenomenal.
That's a great story. Awesome story. So Harmon's as a recruiting strategy.
Yeah, go to Harmon's grocery store, find the manager.
Nice.
I think you always got to be looking for the right talent, right?
Yeah. We're giving away a $50 Amazon gift card for the best question. We've got about 10 minutes left, so be sure and send those in. Just a quick one here. How can I steal an hour of your time to pick your brain? To all panelists, I think reach out via LinkedIn, and we'd love to continue on with the conversation. Next one says, regarding the opt-in opportunities for employees to experience this sense of belonging, what are the examples of opt-in opportunities? And I'm sure we've all had some of those at businesses that we've worked. So maybe share a couple of examples. I'll give you one. I'll give you 2. At a couple companies ago, we formed a charitable foundation, and the volunteer opportunities were enormous for employees to be able to participate. That's not, that doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for a large percentage of them. Another one that we did not too long ago was we created an innovation team where we were going to look at new ways to grow the business, things that we weren't doing today, and allowed people to opt in and participate in those. And that was a good one because that was during work time. It really applied to some people. Others that you guys have used?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Fred.
We've had some success in having causes, and nobody has to opt into those causes, but we give them opportunities to opt in both financially and then follow the cause along so they can see what their money has helped, how it's helped. And we let people opt into trips. So some of the more meaningful retention opt-ins have been around building an orphanage or going on a humanitarian trip instead of doing a President's Club trip, which sounds like on the surface that it might not work and you might not get the enthusiasm. But I will tell you, I am convinced that it increased retention tenfold when people served side by side with one another. So I think those are very, very powerful opportunities to let your people participate in things that matter to them. And as a part of the experience economy, which we're in, provide experiences because those make people sticky.
It's funny too, because one thing I think of is some of the experiences you can have that aren't necessarily a benefit or a perk. And to give an example of that, in one of the businesses I was in, we were going through a pretty big strategy shift. And it was hard. A lot of people were having a hard time jumping on board and really getting excited about it. So originally we kind of handpicked the team. We kind of called them our culture leaders, but we brought this group together and said, we want you guys to be change agents for us. We want you guys to go out to opposite departments, not to your own. And by the way, some of these had leadership titles, some didn't. And we pretty much just said, we need you to go help us sell this. Aside from just, the CEO sending a big email saying, here's what we're doing. Well, after a little while of doing that, we actually started inviting and kind of opening it up, where people who had a desire to be a change agent, we allowed them to kind of jump onto the team and have them go help us sell, people who were bought into it. And it's funny because that wasn't necessarily a benefit or a perk, but all of a sudden they got to opt in and engage in something in the company that actually influenced this major strategy shift. And I think they felt like they were a pretty significant and important part of this change. And I still, 6 or 7 years later now, hear people talk about it. So that's kind of an example of something that's not necessarily a benefit that people can still opt into and really help move the business forward and make an impact.
You triggered something. I have to say it. I know we got to move on to the next question, but we did a program at one company where people got to do cost savings, find ways to save money in the company, and they got a percentage of the savings in return if they could quantify the savings. Talk about change in a company and people getting engaged with wanting to solve problems. That was really powerful.
Nice. Okay, here's my vote for the best question.
Wow.
This one is good. It says, what suggestions can the panel share regarding integrating recruiting and retaining and onboarding? In our large organization, a couple 100,000, unfortunately, recruiting and retaining is very siloed. The attraction silo is pretty good on its own, and the retention silo is pretty good on its own. However, what can we do to integrate the efforts so that they are better aligned and exponentially more effective, so less choppy and more flow? That's a great question.
That's a really good
question. And if we
question.
can keep it, we just have a few minutes left. Let's keep our answers pretty crisp, because then I want to do one lightning question to the four of us at the end.
Okay. One quick comment on that is, this isn't something I thought of. It's something that I actually heard from a mentor of mine who made the comment that everything from onboarding, so recruiting to onboarding to now calling it retention, adding to this question, that you have to create what he called an experience flow, right? And you almost had to kind of map it out a little bit and have this flow from one of those mechanisms to the other and actually create it as if you called it part of your employee experience. A lot of times we have people who are kind of teed up and experts in each of those individual fields. It makes you wonder if we kind of created this whole experience flow and this life cycle of an employee all the way to alumni, right? How it would kind of change things a little bit. So it's more of a thought than an answer, but.
It starts at the top, employee value proposition. You better define it as a company or it will define it for itself. And it starts at the top and it flows through everything. That's my short answer.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing as Tessa. I think that if you want to integrate, you have to have the top bought into the fact that we're going to pay attention to this, we're going to emphasize it, we're going to do it right. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Travis, what do you think?
Software. You should buy Motivosity and EdHR.
Nice. Now we're talking.
I mean, it's the simplest solution. That's exactly the pain and every small, medium, large business has is you got to protect yourself from compliance, regulation, crazy employees, different things can happen. And then on the other side, you got to keep them engaged, retain them. I mean, retention starts day one. Culture is contagious. Any type of software that allows you to do that. And then, it's tweaking the process, never giving up, constantly improving it every single year and meeting as a team and trying to do everything you can to help everyone on an individual basis. Everybody you hire is so different. And so you can't just do one policy or one process. You have to continually implement things and improve them to land and retain the best people.
Great. Okay, last question. We got 2 minutes left. For this webinar audience, give them your best piece of advice. You can pick one that covers retention and attraction, or pick one of those. But if they were sitting in front of you and you were giving them your one golden nugget, what would it be?
Mine would be create human connection. When you can create connections in a world that feels very, very disconnected, and where we're very far apart, you start to win the war on talent. And so you've got to find ways for people to truly connect with one another, truly understand each other. It sounds hokey, but when you can create opportunities for connection, you're going to change, you're going to move the needle.
Nice. Austin?
Yeah, it's hard. I have so much advice on this. Just
No,
kidding.
it's hard to go with such small
No,
bites, isn't it?
It's hard. It's kind of funny because I was actually going down a little bit of the same path because like Tessa, I actually believe that connection is everything, right? When it comes to interviewing, when it comes to building relationships, when it comes to everything, that's kind of one of the most important things. But to kind of add on to that a little bit, I think it is important for people to love what they do. And I think the easiest way to love what you do is to have connections with a lot of different people around you. And so, you know, we talk to a lot of people who are disengaged and disenchanted with kind of what they're doing. And it's just, life's too short. It's not worth it. Love what you do, build good relationships. They're what matter most.
Nice. Travis?
Oh man, one piece of advice, that's the question?
Yeah.
Woo. Marry really well. You know, I'd probably have to say, I think you just got to love others and help them. You know, even when people are complicated and they're hard, think of, you know, what they were like when they were probably 2, 3, 4 years old. I mean, we have 5 kids and we just love them. And so the more you can just love your employees and get to know them, obviously Mindy's Cafe, get a kitchen. You want to build meaningful experiences like Tessa said, let them eat together. I mean, it breaks down silos. It enables them to, you know, put anybody around food and it warms your heart and breaks them down. You can ask for things later. So a lot of things, but I just love your employees, love them to death, try to help them as much as possible. And life works out pretty well.
Nice. Great advice. I think mine would be to pay attention to those motivators. What's really important to employees. And I think you can do that both in attracting them and retaining them. And I think what that does is create some discipline around what you really are spending your time and your money on versus some of these things that really don't have much of an effect. And if you look at, you know, those motivators, belonging, developing a relationship with your manager, feeling appreciated, feeling like you're doing great work, I think that's where you're going to see some added success in business. Okay, so if you guys are okay, we'll give Penny Hakey the $50 gift card for her question about the silo piece. There were a lot of questions that we didn't get to. We have email addresses for each of you. So hopefully the panelists would join me in saying that we'll take each of these questions, we'll divide them up, and we'll reply to you with answers to the question. So every question will be answered. We got to some of them live, but we'll get to all of them. Some of them we'll send you out via email. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. I think this was great. Thank you, panelists, for all that you did. And look for more webinars for Motivosity in the near future. Thank you.